Fire. No, I am not talking about burning a building down. Fire. We're talking about, is this a new trend that we see on the talent market? We had quite some trends and we did more or less well with them. We probably remember that we talked about the Great Resignation and quiet quitting. Great Resignation, many people left their jobs during and after the pandemic, and quiet quitting, simply people decided to do exactly what's in the contract and not a single bit more. You may or may not like that, but as we see, the way the discussion goes didn't lead to anything very productive, except for very few organizations who massively profited from it. When you say no one wants to work anymore, not only is that not backed by science, but also this is something people said since the 1910 years. So about 100 years ago, people started to say no one wants to work anymore. Looking at the numbers, we have the highest amount of people working ever in human history, and the highest share of people working as well. So no matter if you look at absolute or relative numbers, the numbers of people working went up. So people want to work, but probably they don't want to work for certain organizations. And when you're unlucky, they don't want to work for you. So what is FIRE? And yes, FIRE is a new trend that we find in the talent market. FIRE is the counter movement to people who say work is less relevant, spare time, free time, leisure time is more important. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And of course, now some people might say, well, we all like to retire early, but that's not very realistic. So is this all just a pipe dream where we're now talking about how to overpay people and they want to leave even sooner than they already do? So first, they don't leave sooner. We have to stick to science. People actually retire later than they did compared to other generations. It is more about work becoming optional, not retiring completely. However, people often say, is there any scientific foundation to it? And yes, there is. There's a research paper which is called Retirement Savings, Choosing a Withdrawal Rate that is Sustainable. This was written by three Trinity University professors, and it was published in the American Association of Individual Investors Journal in 1998. So it was published 25 years ago. However, now it surfaced and become more and more relevant. You see, science often is very much ahead of the curve, ahead of the time. Some trends surface decades later. The study, by the way, today is only referenced as the Trinity study. And the paper looked at data sets where people had a calculated retirement rate and a retirement plan where they had a certain withdrawal rate. In this case, the withdrawal rate was 4%. And they only looked at data sets where people had a 0% of running out of funds chance. So they looked at people who did not run out of money during their retirement plans and had to get back to work against their will. So they are looking at not business model, but life models that are actually sustainable. You probably, when you now start to Google FIRE and retirement, etc., you will find different versions of that. Because of course, you cannot say that is the retirement everyone wants to have. Fat FIRE, that is what you find most likely right now, especially in Generation Instagram. You find Fat FIRE with quite some very weird pictures of what people think how retirement looks like. I don't think it looks like you're sitting on your private yacht, especially looking at the carbon footprint of that. That wouldn't be a wise idea if we all do that, but that's a different story. Fat FIRE means that your retiring will be mainly with 100,000 or more per year. That is Fat FIRE. So you want to have a close to luxury lifestyle or even a luxury lifestyle when you retire. There are different versions. One of them, for example, is Coast FIRE, which means you have enough money, but you don't have to look at interest rates. So you don't keep the money going with an interest rate. You simply have enough money on the account and that's it. The next option that you will find is Barista FIRE, where I find that the name is not very suitable to what it aims at, because Barista FIRE means that people are very focused on their jobs, and when they have the retirement money together, they have a more relaxed life, which means they either change jobs to a less stressful job, or they simply stay in the same job but working less hours, having less stress. I don't know why they call this Barista FIRE. If you ever have worked as a barista, that is not a relaxed job with no stress. Go to any coffee chain. These people don't look relaxed, or most of them, especially not during rush hours. But it's still called Barista FIRE. I can't change it. I can't misquote the facts here. And the last option you often will see is Lean FIRE, which is for people who live a minimalist lifestyle. I am one of them as well. However, Lean FIRE focuses specifically on people living from 40,000 or less per year before tax. In certain or many countries now, you have to tax all your retirements as soon as you pay it on your account. So 40,000 or less before taxes. per year. That's, of course, very lean, because then you must be aware of the fact that when you run out of money, that will be not only lean, but most likely a very challenging life situation. Still, when you look at minimalist lifestyle, looking at science, many people are very happy living them. And by the way, I am one of them. I'm living out of one carry-on suitcase, as some of you might know. And that's not a metaphor. I'm living out of one carry-on suitcase, and I don't want to change it back to how I lived before. We now simply have to look at, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us as employers, as organizations, as companies, as entities where other people decided to spend more or less time of their life? This is what we're going to focus on right now. First, as a leader, it is your job to master a wide range of different motivations of people. The times where you simply say, oh, we have people, these fit to us, the others don't, you most likely will only attract a way too small crowd. And especially when you want to, and that is basically isomorphism, that's the effect. When you only like to work with people who are exactly like you, that is not only not recommendable, it's also not sustainable, because it lacks diversity. So your organization will not deliver the results it needs to deliver to stay active and successful on the market. You need to manage a very diverse workforce if you want or not. And of course, the inner mission, the so-called purpose, is part of that. I remember when we started to talk about purpose, and people just laughed the way out of the building and said, oh, come on, that's just a new trend. What should we do next? Should we hold their hand and ask them if they are doing well? Well, first, taking care of people being well is pretty much your job as a leader. And the purpose simply means when you don't answer the question, why are we here? What are we doing? Why am I doing this job? People will work somewhere else. And now we come to the most challenging phrase I heard during the last month, when people say, and I heard many organizations saying that, they say, costs of living are not our problem. Hear the news. They are. When you refuse to give someone a pay rise because you say, I can't pay you more because higher costs affect us as well, people will simply look on the market and most likely leave. And they will leave without giving you the notice you want. They will leave as quickly and as silently as possible, giving you the most minimal notice, because the answer that cost of living are none of your business, not your problem, is simply ignorant. Especially when we look into different markets, we have certain markets where salaries are very different between different qualification levels. So normally you can say that in coastal states in the US, salaries are reasonably high depending on what job you do. Normally you have a unionized organization protecting you, and you have a higher or a high minimum wage depending on where you live. Of course, I don't want to portray the US as a place where it's heaven to work, because it clearly is not. However, especially when we have German listeners here, and especially people from Germany, I would definitely exclude people from Switzerland here, because Swiss salaries are very high. One of the reasons why people go there, German salaries are too low, full stop. I now lived in multiple countries. I work in multiple countries. When you look at what you expect, bachelor's degree, master's degree, yada, 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 experience, be somewhere in a different country, bring the experience from all over the world to us, and then look at what you pay, German salaries are too low. By the way, that is a statement that the OECD made. That is not Niels Brabandt's brain saying it. It is the OECD saying it. And also, we lack a certain culture, a culture where we can learn from the UK. Some might be very surprised now, because they might say, well, I looked at the news recently. What can we learn from them? Yeah, it didn't go too well recently with the ideas that were announced just recently. However, the UK has a culture where it is common to talk about salary once or twice per year, even from the employer side. So you get salary raise without asking for it. What is the reason for that? Very simple. People do not leave when you take care of them. And of course, as a self-employed entrepreneur, I know that when you have 7.5% inflation and people expect to get 7.5%, that might be challenging for your organization. You simply have to make a decision. When you say we can't afford that, people will leave. They will go somewhere else to get that 7.5%, because unlike times we had before where inflation was higher, but it was sort of happening in the background, very silent, there was the public opinion that did normally not care much. The public eye did not care about much. The public idea of what is important in life did not care much about inflation. So we just went along with it. However, now at 7.5%, every single person everywhere realizes everything is becoming more expensive at a rate where I simply can't afford this keeping on going. So it is your job to once or twice talk about salaries and give people rises without that they ask. And by the way, when you don't give them these raises, you cut their salaries without them knowing. But of course they know, because they realize. There's one organization where just recently the CEO's assistant asked for a salary raise after 5 years. And what did they say after 5 years? They gave that person 100 euros more per month. And then they complained why she was not thankful. In Germany, 100 euros after tax of a salary raise is probably 47.50 that you can keep. So when that is your thank you for 5 years of loyal service, you shouldn't be too surprised that people move on to go somewhere else. So when you look at inflation right now, the options you have is either you deal with it and you pay people more, or you at least talk to people. If you say, hey, I can't afford it, is there anything else we can do? So for example, you could say you get the same amount of money, but you have to work less hours, or we are going to make you an offer to work online from home partially or completely. So they save on the time for commuting, and they save on the ticket to commute. There are different options how this salary raise might look like. However, it is not your decision if people accept the offer or not. When you say we can't give you more money, we're going to work, we're going to allow you to work online, most people will say, well, that's the standard now anyway. That is not even special. When people say, I want more money on the account, there is no way that you can get around that. And then you have to make a decision. I can simply tell you, when you do not take care of your employees and you still think, how dare they ask for that money, that you will get a brutal response. People will quit at the last moment possible, give you the shortest notice possible if they give you any, or classic move, give you notice, next day don't turn up, call in sick, and that was it. Good luck running the business when someone doesn't hand over the department. It really goes without saying that balancing out inflation has to happen every year, if you like it or not. Very important here is, please don't do this tit for tat principle when it comes to inflation, because that's what I also saw recently. People said, oh, we give you 7.5% in inflation, so now you have to work X amount of hours more, or you have to do this more or that more. No. Inflation is what you raise the salary by, and you get exactly the same service in return. That's why it's inflation. If you want more services, more qualification, more hours worked, you have to pay more than inflation. I'm sometimes very surprised how selective the view of people is who are scientifically qualified, at least from their degree point of view, to make an economical decision. But some people are very selective on their views, most likely because it benefits their department, but only with a very short-term thinking. So you now have to look at the wide spectrum, especially as a leader. You have to look at the wide spectrum of needs you have to cover. Just to give you a short insight, you have to look at what does people motivate? How can I motivate different people? So a situative approach to leadership. Then who likes to work in what ways? So what is your transactional and transformational approach to work? If you haven't heard of that, listen to former podcasts. We talked about that before. Then what is it that people motivate? What does motivate them? The purpose, the inner mission, looking at their motivation. You don't have to like their motivation, but you have to serve their needs if you like if you like it or not. And then, of course, how do you legitimize yourself as a leader? Is it only by formal standards, by your business card, by your title, or by what is more important right now, by social standards? Actually supporting people in what they do and being accepted for the leader you are. You need to show more communication, especially in a hybrid and online model of work. And of course, now some people will say, great, then we just don't make an offer. We don't make an offer for a hybrid working world or an online working world because we don't have time for more communication. We just call them back to the office. That is not even remotely on the agenda. We talked about that before. When you look at the recent Gallup study, 9% of the market, not even every 10th person on the market is keen to get back to the office only. People expect, more than half expect a hybrid offer, about a third prefer to work online only. And that is what you have to deal with right now. There are different ways how to serve the inflation issue. But you now have people who say financial independence, retire early, which means they are focused on money. And let's face it, you cannot on the one hand say no one wants to work anymore and they are all lazy and all the young people are only focused on themselves and they are only focused on leisure time, blah, blah, blah. Then people show up and they say, I want to work hard and a lot to retire early. And you say, that's not okay either, because I want to pay you a low salary and I expect a lot of service in return. That does not work. And when some people said, well, it worked in the past, do not compare 1960s, 1970s, 1980s pension plans to what we have today. Young people are fully aware, with the information being available publicly, that they have to take care of the pension by themselves. And when you say that's not your problem, it is. It was, it is, it will be. And that is your job as a leader. We finally have a trend on the talent market where people want to work more and want to work harder. And then, of course, you have to serve what they ask for. So it is your job to fulfill that need. And now you see there's a wide range of people who want to retire early, work harder. Some people want to work less. Some people say money is more important. Some say leisure time is more important. You see, leadership is becoming more and more complicated. And that's why leaders must be professionally qualified. There are no born leaders. People learn leadership. There are two ways how to learn it, either with professional guidance, which at least keeps you away from making massive wrong decisions that probably cost you 10 times more than any qualification measures you could undergo. Or you can simply do trial and error, which is the most expensive part. And by the way, no one else ever would favor learning by doing. You don't want to have an electrician or a plumber in your house saying, oh, I did this learning by doing. Let's see how this works with your pipes. No. You want qualified people, so probably join the force of becoming a qualified leader, even in a complex world. And of course, I published about this. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, then you receive an email. When you put your email address in there, you receive an email every Wednesday morning. You receive an email. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. Everything I published is available at no charge when you go via that email, but only via that email. You might find my content other places, but there most likely will be a paywall. If you now say, hey, that's a complex issue and salaries is a delicate topic, especially in the culture where I live in, for example, in Germany, we have issues talking about money, of course. If you want to have a confidential talk, just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com, and then we can talk about everything you need. Of course, when you say, hey, I have a very specific request, we need someone for training, workshop speaking, coaching, consulting, or mentoring. We need a project interim manager, or hey, we have an event. Can you host it, or can you speak there online or offline? Of course I can, but we can also just talk about anything you like to talk about, probably in your organization and how you want to make it the best organization possible. nb@nb-networks.com. Looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much for everyone that was sending me emails in the past week. We had great chats, great talks, and it was a very productive and very respectful environment. Thank you very much for that. The most important part will now be that you apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the change happening that you want to have realized, want to have in place, want to have as the new standard in your organization. I wish you all the best implementing these steps in your organization. I'm always happy to help. And at this point, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.